Good God, the past 48 to 72 hours have been very, very difficult for me. I have been under embargo, unable to talk about these cutscenes, hinting at some kind of a Guild Wars 2 expansion, and it has been anguish. I actually got to see this a little bit earlier on in the week. Most of my hype came, and I had to sit on it, and finally we can talk about the actual content of these trailers. So yesterday I talked a little bit about the idea of the expansion pack, why everybody is so keen on it, and it is looking like a very real possibility. Today, guys, let's have a look at the trailers themselves, or largely the two in-game cutscenes. Can we call them trailers? Who really knows? About the future of Guild Wars 2. And we will speculate more on the story developments, what we can expect. So I will open this video giving everyone a rundown of specifically what happened in the most recent patch. Really, you can put it down to three key events. Number one was the Pact, who had been staged at Camp Resolve, were attacked in a huge way by the Mordrum of the Silver Waste. We, the hero player character, got to participate in this assault. Ultimately, we basically carpet bombed the base itself to kick the Mordrum back out, and this was the last moment for Traherne, who decided, right, we're going to attack Morgemoth. We're ready. He's going to send the Pact, their whole fleet of airships, deeper into the jungle to essentially try and destroy the dragon before it can wreak too much havoc, before it awakens to the point where it's in the phase it would devastate everyone, as most of the Elder Dragons have. And so we say our goodbyes to what is left, what little is left, I should say, of Destiny's Edge. That would be Zodja, Air, and Logan, with Traherne joining them. There's even a little bit of dialogue out there about how maybe these guys shouldn't go with the Pact Assault and should instead join us on our hunt for Glint's egg. But they resolve not to, as this would lower troop morale and so forth, having these great heroes fighting alongside them. And so those three, the last we see them, they're heading off to meet with Traherne and then go assault Morgemoth on board these airships. That's thing number one. What I would note as well, you guys might have picked up on it, but on this patch, I believe this is the only patch we've seen in Season 2 where it's happened, Zodja was actually speaking to us once again. I actually threw out a tweet because it shook me, it surprised me while I was playing last night, and said, wow, did they actually manage to get Felicia Day back to do voice for Zodja, who, if people have been out of the loop, this voice actress hasn't returned for much of the Living World stuff at all. They haven't really been able to get a hold of her because she's very busy, and she voiced one of the main characters for the launch of the game. Well, she's back now. ArenaNet did actually tweet me back. They confirmed, yeah, this is Felicia Day, and then Felicia herself joined on that tweet train and said, yeah, I did some voices. So, don't you guys think that maybe this is even more credence to the idea that an expansion is coming out, given the fact that she probably wouldn't have returned to the studio for a single line at the end of Season 2's Living World? Yeah, that seems kind of unlikely, right? The other part, we opened up with Marjorie at the Dermot Priory. Don't forget that this is a character who has a history with the Priory, and we are looking for a way into this seed cave where we predict that Kaith is hiding with Glint's egg. And we do figure out how to get into the cave. We find out that it's a forgotten seal from Ogden, Stone Healer, great dwarf and hero of the first game, who was reintroduced to the story quite recently. Ogden teaches us about the Forgotten, and we invoke a ritual where we bring Churai Os's spirit back, and he guides us through sort of a mock interpretation of the process of ascension. And loads of the dialogue at this part of the patch was pulled directly from old Guild Wars 1 missions. It was very nostalgic and cool. Ultimately, we are blessed with something called Divine Fire. Divine Fire was something that existed in Guild Wars 1. Hopefully there'll be some footage of it right now. It was a very small, like, insignificant buff that would go on your character and really had very little meaning. Essentially, once you had done all of the rites of ascension in Guild Wars 1, and just as you were in this epic final battle with your doppelganger, you would have a buff on you that was purely for flavor. It didn't affect combat at all, but it simply said Divine Fire, and your character looked like they were burning. Well, in Guild Wars 2, they've given us more lore about this idea, and though we never became ascended with this kind of mock version of it, we played out in the Dermot Priory, we did learn how to get our hands on Divine Fire, and we used this to enter the Seed Cave. And so the third and final thing that this plot showed us before these cutscenes came up, which I'm about to talk to you guys about, was we entered the cave. We realized this indeed was one of many hidden places the Forgotten had built throughout Tyria. The Forgotten are a race that we have not met in the second game. They were an ancient race of snake-like people who, on the behalf of the human gods, once were protectors of the world, but slowly forced back by the other races becoming stronger. Races like the Char, races like the humans, until they only lived in the Crystal Desert. And so in Guild Wars 1, we did did get to interact with the Forgotten a little bit, but not too much of their architecture was around. There was a mysterious golden room where we ascended at Augury Rock in the first game, and we never really had any idea who had built this place. Turns out it was the Forgotten, and they had hidden that room away at Augury Rock, just like they hid a room away now in Guild Wars 2 story in the Silver Wastes. So we enter this place and we find this beautiful golden room, probably the highlight of the whole patch for me, exploring that place, being wowed by it, and as we marvel at these things, we realize Kaith has actually arrived here. We plant our last memory seed and find out the truth, her big secret. And this secret, as it happens, is confirmation that many of us in the player base have believed for a long time, that the Sylvari are minions of Morgemoth. The story goes that one of the firstborn, Wynn, she was the firstborn of the Cycle of Night, and in this capacity, she had seen the Sylvari's true nature. She had seen facts about Morgemoth. The Pale Tree, knowing that Wynn had this information, begged her not to tell anyone, keep it as a secret, because if this could get out too early while the Sylvari were very young, how would other races have reacted to them? How would the Asura have reacted to them? They would have destroyed them. They would have crushed them underfoot. The Pale Tree didn't want that. She wanted the Sylvari to be something else. The Pale Tree had been influenced by the likes of Ronan and Ventari, and so Wynn was supposed to keep this quiet. Foulane, however, got wind of this secret, as we saw, kept pushing Wynn, and ultimately Wynn asked Kaith to kill her so that the questions would stop, and then Kaith could bear the secret where Foulane would never, you know, seek to find it. And so Kaith did this. It's quite dramatic. It was quite dark. I talked about this in the last episode. A little bit out of place, I suppose, to an extent, though to many of the naysayers who say that it just doesn't make any sense story-wise, you do have to put it a little bit into the context of the naivety of the Sylvari. Don't forget, they were very young at this time, very childlike, and yes, this was quite a terrible thing that Kaith did, but she was also doing what she thought was right, and she had good reason for, and she may not have been old enough or understood enough about Tyria to really grasp this act with the same emotional gravitas maybe we would as human beings playing a video game, right? So I do forgive it a little bit, and I think it was a pretty cool scene. Anyway, so we find out this. We return to the cave where Kaith has indeed come. She affirms to us that she is indeed on our side, does not give us a chance to take the egg from her. We are attacked by one of Morgemoth's minions. How did it find us in this cave? Who knows? Was Kaith somehow baiting it there to finish us off because we were chasing her with the egg? Is she still being a bit of a double agent? As the dragon attacks, Kaith disappears once again with it. We are left to slay our foe, which we do. And finally, the story ends and this cutscene shows. So that is where we are left with the story. Kaith missing with the egg, perhaps a sleeper agent, the Pact flying off to take out Morgemoth, and so let's jump into it. Just for clarification as well, I won't be showing the full thing with its original audio in this video. We're going to be doing what I'm calling a frame by frame. It's not really a frame by frame, it's just every time the shot changes, I'm going to talk to you guys about what we see. So we first get a cutscene. This one's going to be the shorter of the two. There's a little bit less to say. I do want to pause on each shot though, because the art is phenomenal. Alright, let's do it. Okay, so here we should be seeing the destruction of the dragon, of course, the shadow of the dragon. And the cutscene begins. Of course, we start with this big sort of white splash here, and the main thing we're going to be looking at are the Pact. So, whether this assault works or not, we, the player character, are not there. We don't seem to participate in it at all. You guys will know in a video earlier in the week, I absolutely did speculate that the Pact would be destroyed. I think it makes most narrative sense that they could. So I was pretty much on the edge of my seat at this point. Here we see our main characters. Of course, we've got Traherne here on the left. We've got Logan Thackeray, Zodja, and Air. And if you look carefully in the bottom right there at that cannon, it also looks quite a lot like they are on board the Glory of Tyria. Maybe that's just my opinion, though. We definitely will see them on it later. Here we get a beautiful shot of the jungle. And what we need to remember with this shot, or that you can most speculate about, is where exactly this is supposed to be. I would say anywhere further west from where we're currently experiencing the story. Southwest at that, too. Very soon we're going to see the coast in the background, and hopefully that'll mean something to you guys. But of course, look, it's very thick, it's very verdant, it's lush. There's life everywhere. This is not the Silver Waste, this is not Dry Top. This is a long way away already, so it would seem. Of course, looking very impressive there. Then suddenly we get some a very short shot here. Some of the airships coming through. No sight of the Glory of Tyria here, just a couple of airships. And then again, another sweeping shot. There's quite a few of these actually establishing the way this goes. I really did enjoy this cutscene. I just feel like the characters were slightly off in it. I don't know. And suddenly things kick off. Here we get Traherne being the marshal, war marshal of the pact. He says fire. It sounds a bit weird. I believe it's mostly because it's supposed to be in slow motion. So the pact do land the first strike. And basically, Vietnam style, I've already used the word carpet bombing in this video. They are just blowing the hell out of the jungle, just taking pot shots there. So you can see the destruction unfold. All these massive artillery strikes coming in, spraying up these heaps of dirt everywhere. And it's just a bit relentless on the pack side for now. No real response seemed to be coming from the Mordrim, should they even be there. Which I guess we're assuming we are. We get, again, another shot. This time we notice something, though. Logan, Air, and Zodja are no longer with Marshal Traherne. He is nowhere to be seen. They have their weapons drawn. They're scanning for enemies, I suppose. This is kind of the narrative of the trailer they're trying to set up here. What exactly is going on? Silence. Nobody's shooting anymore. You'll notice this. They're waiting for a reprieve. What has happened? Have we even been successful, I would suppose? And then, of course, we get this shot of the mists. The vines come tangling out of nowhere. The pact really don't know how to deal with this. I wonder whether, should an expansion come, or just, I guess, the continuation of the living world, we'll be seeing giant vines like this become mechanics within the game. Do remember that in Guild Wars 1, while we were in the Maguma jungle, there, and even a little bit in Guild Wars 2 already, we've seen it, there was a lot of stuff about great vine bridges that the Shining Blade learned, I believe it was a druid practice, how to craft from within the jungle. Was this Mordrim, innate Mordrim magic they're using? Is this basically the vine bridges, but being used in a very offensive, different way, being tapped into by the dragon? Were they always the essence of the dragon? Anyway, so they come flying out into the sky. We get this lovely black and white shot. This is probably my favorite image of this entire cutscene. Look at this thing. It looks phenomenal. I feel like you could just win an art award for this alone. Shattering the airships, completely cleaving them in two. Think about the assault on Zaitan. It was much longer, more attritive. Nothing like this ever really happened. We never tried to sneak up on Zaitan. Is this what would have happened, more or less, if the pact had just flown straight in at Zaitan, heads on, without doing the entire war before, without battling to the gates of Ara on all three fronts, ground, air, and naval, instead of just like an air assault as we've got here? But yeah, so things suddenly seem to have swung around. More vines come out, grapple onto the airships. This is really cool. Reminds me a little bit of Pirates of the Caribbean 3 when they're fighting the Kraken, actually. Just dragging them out of the sky. Here you'll notice on this shot as well, we've got that little purple light, which is where I've frozen it now. That actually, there was like a slice appeared in the hull of the ship. Then the purple light appeared, and then very shortly after I replay this, you'll notice that just explodes. So again, there's like a suggestion that these aren't just vines physically cleaving into things. There's magical stuff going on here too. Where could a magical explosion like this have come from? We are probably supposed to wonder. How did that blow up from the inside? Well, we'll see in a second. Here we get another shot. It's the ground troops, as we can see here. They look like they have some kind of giant friggin' tank in the background there. It's got that telltale kind of turquoise, I believe, color, which is very reminiscent of the weaponry we used to fight Zaitan. Remember, the only way we were able to defeat Zaitan was by poisoning his magic and firing it back at him. Is this Gore's technology? Who knows? But there, this is the ground assault, and it's a little bit disjointed here because we see Air and Logan down. Presumably Zodja is around here too also. And they're going to appear on an airship again very shortly, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. But yeah, they're looking back almost as if back up to the sky, as if they're shocked by something that's happened, in my opinion. This crazy person comes here, dual-wielding axes, nothing like mechanical we can look at with the weapons just yet. Comes leaping forward. I actually do not believe this is a character we've met before. Maybe someone later. But also looks a little bit like a Sylvari. Then we cut back and see these two seemingly returning the assault. But against who? Against what? That character, that Sylvari we just saw? We're sort of left to speculate at this, because then the scene just cuts again to more vines, more airship destruction. This one again is particularly pretty, very jungly, the environments in the background here. And suddenly we're seeing destruction up on the airships here too. And this is very subtle, something I think many players watching may have missed. Pay attention to what we just saw there. We saw an explosion on an airship. I'll replay it if I have to. We saw an explosion on an airship. Where did the explosion come from? Then the camera pans to reveal a Sylvari in packed gear stood on another airship holding a flaming barrel. And so you might think for a second, oh, well, was it throwing the flaming barrel to try and get the vines off the airship? Well, no, not quite. We play forward a little bit more and you'll see it throws another one. These Sylvari are betraying the pact here. There are people up in the skies destroying the airships much as the Zephyrite were destroyed at the start of Season 2. We're seeing the same situation here. This is betrayal, guys. These are some Sylvari, sleeper agents of Morgemoth, turning unexpectedly on the Pact. This could be perhaps the hamstring that cripples their assault. Here we get another cut to another airship here. You'll notice at the bottom we've got this kind of arch-style looking thing. Again, some more green magics there. This is important, guys. All this fire obscuring everything, this is fire on the glory of Tyria. We are now not just any longer on a regular airship, we're on the Pact flagship, the thing that destroyed an Elder Dragon once before. Well, it can't do that if its crew are busy fighting one another, which again we can see up there behind the railings. Here we move forward a little bit more. Perfect example here. You've got air, bow strung, aiming at a Sylvari, wielding these two axes, trying to attack Logan here. So again, they've suddenly appeared on the airship. But this is betrayal. This is backstabbing. This is the Sylvari ruining things, basically. We get this beautiful, gorgeous shot. I don't know how many times I can end up saying this, of the many Pact ships in the sky being destroyed, being sabotaged. This totally badass looking guy here wielding, what can we see? Either some kind of standard, or is that a spear? Who knows? He just looks awesome. He's sort of staring on. What side is he even affiliated with? How can we know? And finally, it's been a bit ambiguous up until this point, but what we're seeing there is a particularly large airship crash to the ground. I believe what we're looking at towards the end of this cutscene is the glory of Tyria itself. If this scene especially doesn't confirm it, the glory of Tyria falling out of the sky, and Morgemoth ultimately winning. It sets up a very clear progression here. There you go. Once again, the glory of Tyria on the top left sets up a very clear progression that, hey, the Pact tried to assault Morgemoth. They were betrayed, and they failed. But again, this looks like our three heroes. The fate of Traherne is completely unknown. We've got these grasping hands on the bottom left, aiming up towards air. This is very reminiscent to what we saw around the launch of just regular Guild Wars 2 with the Risen, with the undead clawing at people. This was something they did a lot again, but now it's not even Risen, right? Are these just other Sylvari? Who knows? But of course, there in the background as well, you've got Logan and Zodja swinging from some chain. We move along, and the voiceover will continue. Here we get another angle from behind. You get to see a little bit more maybe of what people are fighting, but it looks like pretty bad odds for these characters. This shot was interesting to me because it showed this kind of green well of magic on the ship, and again, I wonder if this is something to do with Gore's technology, maybe something we haven't seen at all so far. I really have no idea. Green magic has, of course, been like greenish fire like this has been used, but I couldn't speculate too much beyond that, except just maybe it's supposed to look pretty, and it shows their power supplies have been cut off, and really there's very little hope. So we cut to black again. And we are reminded, of course, of the fall of the Pact. And so that is the end of the cutscene. That's the first one. I don't really think there's too much to say on there. This is, of course, the thing that everyone, I guess, ArenaNet was expecting to watch. If you think about Season 1, we ended on a very nice cinematic cutscene. So this isn't too unprecedented at this point. This could easily still just be talking about Living World Season 3. We're not seeing anything to do with an expansion right now. And so then, of course, we get to claim our reward, and we get another cutscene, and so this may be the more interesting one. Funnily enough, I would just like to point out that ArenaNet uploaded this in an official capacity on their YouTube page just earlier today, and their title for this cutscene I'm now showing you is that it's an Easter egg cutscene. Which is curious. An Easter egg would suggest that it was somehow hidden within the patch, right? And Jesus Christ, what a great Easter egg this really would have been, eh? But I guess that they maybe had an idea for it to be an Easter egg early on, and then they realized, oh wait, we can't actually do this as an Easter egg, never mind, we'll show it to everyone. I think it probably ultimately was the best move, because it would get more eyeballs on it, it would get more hype around the expansion, and so now what we're seeing is their angle specifically towards beyond this destruction of the Pact. There is a little bit of crossing over of events, but yeah, this is the one that maybe we want to focus a lot more on. In particular, I have a lot to talk about with one specific shot, but here we go. Okay, so we're going to open up here with, we're going to freeze frame really quickly. The first thing I'll say is you'll notice that the art style is already very different to what we saw before. This is a lot more concept-y. They're clearly using some kind of new technology. There's a big part of me that wonders, hey, is this going to be something we'll see as a standard within the game for the expansion? You'll notice it particularly when we see Kaith in just a second. But things are, of course, already very different. The reason we've paused already is because this is quite clearly an eye with teeth, right? This is very similar to what we saw on the Season 1 finale, where we got our first ever glimpse at Morgemoth originally waking up, except now instead of all this kind of green bluey lighting, we are looking at like a very deep orangey fiery red. Now try not to get bogged down thinking about the other Elder Dragon Primordus. Just consider that red seems to become a bit of a theme. I'll be talking about the color red a lot as we go forward here. Seems to mark the Sylvari that perhaps have turned, and many of the Morgem now going forward. So yeah, I thought that was a pretty cool little callback. And then the eye opens very quickly. We've frozen again very quickly, and we see, is this his eye? I suppose it's supposed to be, but on some other level, of course, there was a lot of story during this most recent season about the orbs, right? How each dragon represented an orb. I do not think it's a coincidence we're looking at an orb right here. And even better, what do we see within this orb? We see these kind of stray golden lines that are very, very reminiscent to Scarlet's perception of the pale tree, remember? Remember these suggestions that the pale tree and Morgemoth were somehow similar or somehow the same? Well, there you go. We can see this representation actually within one of these orbs now, unlike an early interpretation we saw where the tree was like in the middle and all the orbs surrounded it. I don't want to get bogged down in the orbs discussion here, but this already could mean things. Progressing forward, what's even cooler now is, yes, it feels in the background a little bit. Kaith starts to talk. She says the dragon is rising. As she says the dragon is rising, what happens to our orb? It lights up. It ignites. Again, just like we saw with our vision of the Eternal Alchemy, suggesting he is now fully active and shit is going to hit the fan, basically. Excuse my French. So we move forward. They do kind of one of these very classy transitions into the packed fleet in the sky. They do that a lot. I'm going to try and not be too poetic with reality here. So we don't really have to look into the transitions, in my opinion, that deeply. They just do some fancy things here. But we're supposed to be looking, once again, reminded of the fact, hey, look, the packed fleet is in the sky. One thing I find interesting already by this is you'll notice, again, there seem to be multiple glories of Tyria. We've seen multiple glories of Tyria in concept art, but not actually in game yet. So what is this saying? Is this the same assault we just witnessed in the previous cutscene that all went wrong? Have we gone like, is there a bit of overlap here? Or is this something entirely different? Maybe later when the Pact had even more resources? Who knows? Or maybe it's just to look pretty and they wanted some variation in airship design on there. Who knows? So if we play even further now, we get another transition straight to Kaith here. She says here that, you know, some hype lines, basically, no one in Tyria is safe, but you really want to pay attention to the way her face moves, the shading here. This is not something we've seen before, guys. This is some new technology, as I've mentioned, and I would love to see many of their cinematics utilize something like this in the future. Of course, who are we to say or speculate on how difficult this was for them to produce, but yeah, it was very cool, and, you know, I think it would be very unlikely for ArenaNet to have developed the capability of doing something like this and never utilize it further. I think if we're going to get another trailer of sorts at PAX South, we may be seeing a lot more of this kind of art style being employed. It is certainly more realistic, much more photorealistic than what we've had otherwise. You know, Kaith looks kind of real in a really pleasant way. She's not even in the uncanny valley, like, awkwardly right now. She's just this lovely blend of artistic styling and actually moving very realistically. So I think this is really cool. I don't have anything much more to say on Kaith here, of course, aside from the fact that, aside from the technology being used to render her, what she's doing, the story, is she with us or against us? It really doesn't confirm either way, though her giving the narrative sort of suggests she's still on our side. So then we cut again, and now we appear to be back with the Pact, and this would be Traherne, Zodja, Air, Logan together. Again, so my hunch would be that this is before the assault begins. I cannot imagine these guys, you know, having a whole other assault before the X-Pack drops or something like that. Looks like they're preparing some similar sort of things to what we just saw in the cutscene from before. And of course, being suddenly destroyed, being knocked over, falling over, I think this is symbolic rather than anything else. I wouldn't worry yourselves too much about them all being dead. Okay, so now we're going to move into probably the most enticing shot of the trailer. I'll try and replay this quite frequently for you guys. I have two main things to discuss with you. This is what most people are very, very, very hyped about. So, and I even took some notes, so let me go and have a look at my notes here. The first question on my lips was, where is this taking place? I must be honest, when I first watched this trailer, this immediately made me think of the underworld, and everything was a bit of a blur, and the next shot will be showing us Ritlock, who we currently know is in the mists, which would place him perhaps in the underworld, in the realm of the undead. And so I was thinking, hey, this could be underworld. This could mean that whatever this expansion is going to have some kind of slant towards the veterans, the hardcore players. This could be suggesting that the underworld is going to become a playable place later as well, and this was all very exciting to me. There were some places in the first game that vaguely looked a little bit like this. Maybe the lighting is just a little bit similar. I've totally gone back on that idea now, though. What I think we're looking at here, guys, is the Tarnished Coast. In the previous cutscene, in the background, you will have noticed a large body of water. And so this suggests that when the Pact moved further down, or wherever this content is going to take us deeper into the jungle, this will include areas of the coast. For those who aren't familiar with Guild Wars 1, but during Guild Wars 1's time, when we got to go to the Tarnished Coast, 250 years before the events of this game, we found tons of ruins littered around, left by some mysterious race we were unsure about. It turned out, though, a lot of these, the names of the zones and cities and places were anagrams for other things, and the most famous one was Rata Sum, the current capital of the Asura, located on the Tarnished Coast. Rata Sum, when it was found 250 years ago and hadn't really been colonized by the Asura, and they hadn't built all their stuff all over it, they were just essentially squatting in the ruins of some other civilization who had long since left and disappeared. And an anagram for Rata Sum, this collection of ruins that they had originally found, is the word Mursaat. This is something I've talked about quite a lot on my channel, but this fact seems to suggest to many people that the ruins left on the Tarnished Coast by some mysterious race, that mysterious race were the Mursaat. It would make a lot of sense. The Mursaat were a villainous race, a massive fan favorite race, the big bad guys essentially of the original campaign where Guild Wars originally started. These were the bad guys. It wasn't Elder Dragons or anything. It was the Mursaat. There was a lot of really complicated story involving them, making them grey villains at best. You know, they were doing these terrible things, but they were only doing it to save their own lives because of a prophecy that they thought was going to come true. So there was stuff you could understand about them, and yet at the same time they were very evil and mysterious and powerful and ancient, and they knew things about Tyria we never knew at all. But through some very complicated nonsense I won't get into, we ultimately bested them and destroyed essentially their entire race. And then we went to the Tarnished Coast and it was empty. And so the idea would be, oh, the Mursaat were probably here, but we defeated them a few years ago and now they've all moved on. The Tarnished Coast itself is very close to the very site where the Mursaat ultimately met their makers and were destroyed, the Fire Island chain. And so, having confirmation in Guild Wars 2, finally, with Heart of Thorns, that these indeed were Mursaat ruins, would be very exciting indeed, and would suggest some kind of Mursaat involvement with the story. Don't forget that one of the more subtle things they did in Season 2 for us was they introduced us to a new map, the Silver Wastes, which again had a bunch of mysterious ruins, and whether these ruins in the Silver Wastes are the same as the ruins we're seeing here on this image, who knows, but we are familiar with the fact that the people squatting in those ruins were very likely the White Mantle, a group of humans who worship, guess who, the Mursaat. So the Mursaat have already been seeded into the story a little bit, and it would kind of make sense that now that we're taking the fight to Mordremoth deeper into this jungle, deeper to areas the Mursaat once had great presence, that they should have some value here in this story. And of course we do have a mysterious figure on the screen as well. I'll get to that in 1 second. One final thing I'd love to show you guys. We'll just track it along a little bit longer here. And you'll notice as we spiral around these ruins, the mysterious creature seems to interact with them in some way, and the lighting turns very golden. And one thing we never saw for ourselves, but we are familiar with, is the fact that the Mursaat supposedly, when they were at their height, this civilization of enemies, when they were at their height that we never saw, they had great golden cities that made people think of the heavens and were beautiful, okay? And what do we see here? We see these ruins that could be Mursaat ruins. Geographically it makes sense, and they are being interacted with in some way and seemingly being restored to their former glory. And so this brings me to the mysterious creature. Everything I've said should make it pretty clear already. I think this is a Mursaat we're seeing. Now, it looks very different to the Mursaat of Guild Wars 1. I'm not necessarily against the new design. I don't necessarily think the design we see here would be exactly how it's represented in-game either, but it does have the same general traits that pin it as a Mursaat. It is a bipedal, two-armed long, thin, elegant-looking creature that doesn't walk but floats and has like these thin strands of like 8 wings floating in the back behind it. I think it is incredibly Mursaat-like. I think there is a chance that it is a seer. A seer, for those of you who are unaware, was another ancient race, much like the Mursaat, who once went to war with them but lost their war like thousands of years ago. This is now before anything we ever saw in the franchise. So you got the idea of the Mursaat and the seers. I don't think it's a seer. I think the seers, though they could still be around also, are probably not being shown here. What I think we're looking very literally at is a Mursaat restoring his old ruins to former glory, or symbolically trying to bring the Mursaat back from the brink. There's even more that supports this. Look at the dialogue we get during this scene here. We get this line about destiny, breaking free from destiny. I just told you guys that we defeated the Mursaat, so how could they still be about now, 250 years later in Guild Wars 2, to restore themselves to their former glory? Well, was it their destiny to be destroyed? So they thought, and so we thought as the players when we annihilated them. But in Eye of the North, towards the very end of Guild Wars 1, there was a chain of side quests which set up the fact there was one last surviving Mursaat, a Mursaat named Lazarus the Dyer, who had, in order to escape his own destruction, split himself into multiple aspects and hidden within various hosts around the world. And in the events of Eye of the North 250 years ago, he reassembled himself before our very eyes and said that countless generations would suffer for what we had done, the humans, and that we would pay, and that basically he endeavored to bring the Mursaat back. And that was a long time ago, guys. That was years ago. That was Guild Wars 1, Eye of the North. We haven't really heard anything about the Mursaat. We know that some humans on the planet still think that they're out there, and now we're going to fight an Elder Dragon in what was once Mursaat territory. And maybe Lazarus the Dyer is there. Maybe this is exactly who we're looking at. And maybe he's gonna bring them back, and they're gonna be a big element of this expansion. That's something I'm very excited to see, because I, like many, am a little disappointed. The future of Guild Wars 2 for the short term, at least, seems to still be dealing with like Elder Dragon stuff, Morgemoth stuff in particular, rather than going to very distant places. Well, this is old lore, and if the Mursaat come as a big player, maybe unlikely allies, maybe a third faction of enemies, or a second faction of enemies, as it were, that could be very exciting to me. What exactly does he plan to do in the middle of a war zone with an Elder Dragon? Well, maybe that doesn't matter, because he seems to make this all become very golden and very nice. So we'll have to see. I'm very excited, and I do in fact think that's a Mursaat. Oh, and further as well, just before we move on, there is also this idea, again in the dialogue, of Kaith talking about insight here. She says we will need insight to defeat the Elder Dragons. The Season 2 story stuff has already set up the idea that maybe Ascension will be important. The Mursaat were a race that we as humans couldn't even see or interact with. They were so powerful unless we specifically became Ascended, right? And we gained the gift of true sight. Is that what Kaith is hinting at here? That we need insight, the gift of true sight, to be able to fight back against the Elder Dragons? Are the Mursaat then strong enough to fight against the Elder Dragons? Because presumably they have insight themselves. Who knows? So let's move on. The gold sparks into a flame held above someone's head. Hello, this is Ritlock Brimstone. For your average player of Guild Wars 2, they've heard nothing about Ritlock since his mysterious disappearance into the mists earlier in the season. And here we finally get some more voiceover from him. Again, I was stuck on the Underworld idea. I thought we were seeing Ritlock in the Underworld. I now no longer believe that. I think we're just looking at him somewhere out in the jungle. I think when he returns from his trip to the mists, he's going to be out in Mordrum territory. And he is a complete badass. He destroys all of these Mordrum around him, slices them down, and I guess he's going to be a very powerful player. You'll notice, I believe, that his blindfold is still on him, though it's kind of difficult to see, so this could still be very permanent character development for him, while still keeping him as a bit of a badass. Then we have, obviously, the very exciting line from him, "You can't trust Sylvari, they belong to the dragon now," suggesting perhaps that future content in this franchise will set up some kind of tensions, factions, stuff like that, aggression between the various races, and we'll see how deep ArenaNet dive into that idea, if at all. So yeah, he slashes all these guys down. We'll let that play out. Very badass. We get a fancy looking transition, And we're on the steps of some great building. At first, I thought this could perhaps be the Dermond Priory. I'm actually more likely thinking this is the palaces or great hallways in Divinity's Reach now. We see Kanak. Kanak is a fan favorite, probably the best character I think they ever introduced in the Living Story. A real anti-villain, a bit of a grey hero. He's done some messed up stuff. We're not really meant to like him that much, but he's sort of on our side at the moment. Really well written, fantastically well voiced, and so he stands in direct opposition to Ritlock. Ritlock, also a fan favorite, who's saying, you know, you can't trust in the Savari. Kanak is saying, stop treating us like monsters. He's being charged, he's being assaulted on these steps by what looks like, in my opinion, many Seraph and Ministry Guard people. So again, I think this is in Divinity's Reach. Don't forget that Kanak is very close to the Queen, or at least Countess Anise right now, and there could be great stories with him there. He's got nothing to do with the Pact right now, but there could be very cool things in store for him, and we'll see a little bit more on Kanak again in a future shot in the trailer here. So playing further along, I think there's something about his equipment as well, his shield, that just makes it very easy to identify him. We get the battlefield, so again we're back with the Pact. Now something that I really am going to want to point out here is, look at the red. Okay, now Kanak in this previous shot himself was looking fairly red. Here we have what are quite clearly Pact Vigil people fighting Sylvari. These are the tensions, these are people fighting one another, and I think what ArenaNet are trying to do to demonstrate those who have been turned is using this kind of red lighting. Some of those Mordrim that Ritlock was fighting earlier, they had this very red lighting on them. We see it here again. And so as we progress through this little fight scene here, very big, meaty, clunky hits. Again, I'll be very excited to see this actually be a part of the game. We see lots of these people with these red flares. Freezing it here for a second. This is not our only shot of it, but this is the one I'll point out. Character wielding a spear. Our spear is going to become above ground weapons with the expansion. Are all underwater weapons going to become above ground weapons? I would very much like to see that. That seems like something, not even a tall order for ArenaNet to put in, right? If we're going to have an X-Pack, people are going to want actual gameplay changes like this. So progressing forward again, this person gets slashed down. The dual axes, and here, look at the Mordrim. Look at the Mordrim with all this red crap all over his face. Again, it's supposed to draw a link, and then we get another Sylvari. This one's winning. And lastly, we have Foulane, and interestingly enough, Foulane is devoid of these little flares. Foulane just seems to be herself. Where does she stand? Where do the Nightmare Court stand as the Mordrim start claiming Sylvari? Again, is she a third faction, a fourth faction? Who knows? But it was really cool for me to actually see Foulane here, and as it progresses, as she sort of impales this guy, she sort of appears to be within the eye of Mordremoth. And that sets her character up in some very interesting places. We go back to where where we began, really, with this idea of the orb. More of these kind of flares, again, making me think of the pale tree. And slowly we zoom out. It turns into a moon. I do not think that Mordremoth is somehow connected to the moon because of this. Again, I think it's just a transition. But we come to the final shot now, descending through the Thorns, the title's namesake. And we have Destiny's Edge 2.0, the heroes, stood here, and most interestingly, of course, is down there on the bottom left, we have Kanak. Looking like Kanak will finally join Destiny's Edge 2.0. This was something I was sort of against for a long time because I felt like they were just, as I've explained, filling racial quotas. Like, oh, we have to have a band of adventuring heroes and they have to have one of each race. And that seems very unnatural to me. However, Kanak has been in the story long enough, and it's logical enough that he'd want to team up with these guys, that I'm pretty happy with it. So yeah, that's going to be a bit of a development for them. And how do these guys fit in now, these new heroes, into this story where all of the rest of the Destiny's Edge are split up all over the place? And how, I guess, they'll be the band of adventurers we're hanging around with, right? Timey with a golem over there looking pretty badass. And they stare off into the distance, over to the mountains. Is this this idea of mountains over there suggesting to us there could be more territory to explore than just jungle? I would hope so. As I say, I'm a little bit disappointed that it could just be Mordremoth. But again, maybe put it in this perspective. Guild Wars 1 was about fighting Zaitan. Guild Wars 1 didn't take place entirely in Ore, though, did it? It had tons of regions for us to explore, and there could be just as many, especially with the idea of Ascension, for us to explore in Heart of Thorns, should everything go that way. So there you go, guys. That's basically my preliminary thoughts on the trailer. I still have so much more to talk to you all about. That's pretty much what I can glean from it. If I've missed anything, let me know below, and I will definitely do addendums and further follow-up videos as time passes. As for now, though, I'm pretty excited, and I like an awful lot of what I see. I'd love to see what you guys think. Anyway, cheers, guys. Have a great day, and catch you next time.